I want you to think about the worst moment of your life. Not the saddest, the worst. The one where the floor dropped out and you realized that everything you thought was solid was actually just a very convincing illusion. For me, that moment came on a Wednesday afternoon in October, standing in my kitchen in my socks, holding a glass of water I never drank, staring at my husband's iPad screen. It was a notification. Just a notification. 3 lines of preview text from an app I didn't recognize, a name I didn't know. Last night was everything. I keep thinking about what you said, about how you've never stopped loving me. Come back to me. For real this time. My name is Reese Calloway. I am 38 years old. I have been married for 11 years. I have 2 children. I have a house I love and a life I built and a husband I would have bet everything I owned on. And in 30 seconds, standing in my kitchen in my socks, I lost every single one of those bets. But here's the part that broke me. Not just hurt me, broke me, all the way to the floor. It wasn't just that he was cheating. It was when it started. Stay with me. Before we go any further, drop your location in the comments right now. City, state, country, wherever you are. I started this channel because I needed somewhere to tell the truth, and I want to know who is out there receiving it. Let me see you. My name is Reese Calloway, Reese Mitchell before I took his name, which is one of the small ironies I live with now. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the middle of 3 sisters, in a house full of noise and opinions, and a mother who made everything from scratch, and a father who coached high school basketball for 22 years, and believed, with the fervor of a true believer, that character was built in difficulty. I was the middle sister, not the responsible oldest, not the charming youngest, but the one in the middle who observed everything and said less than she thought. I studied graphic design at Ohio State. I was good at it, not brilliant, but good, with the kind of steady, reliable competence that turns into a career if you show up for it. I moved to Chicago at 23, found a job at a mid-sized branding agency, found an apartment with 2 roommates, and began the project of building an adult life. I met Daniel Calloway at a mutual friend's birthday party when I was 26. He was 29. He was, and I say this now without bitterness, because it is simply true, the most immediately compelling person I had ever been in a room with. Not just attractive, though he was that. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of easy confidence that reads as warmth until you know better. He was funny in the way that makes a whole room feel like it was made for him. He was attentive in the way that makes you feel, specifically, like you were made for him. He asked for my number and I gave it to him. He texted the next morning. He took me to dinner 3 days later and we talked for 4 hours, and I drove home feeling the specific dislocation of someone whose life has just changed shape. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on a Saturday morning in our apartment. No grand gesture, no restaurant, just him and me and coffee and a ring he'd been carrying in his jacket pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. He said, "I don't want to do any of this without you." I said yes. We were married 11 months later. I was 29. He was 32. 114 people came to our wedding. My mother cried during the vows. My father shook Daniel's hand and said, "Take care of her." And Daniel said, "Always." And I believed him with my whole heart. That was 11 years ago. I want to be honest about our marriage, because it deserves honesty. It was not a bad marriage. I need you to understand that. It was not a marriage full of red flags I ignored or gut feelings I suppressed. It was a real marriage, complicated and warm and sometimes frustrating and mostly good, the way real marriages are. Daniel was a good father to our children, our daughter Nora, who is 9, and our son Cal, who is 7. He coached Cal's soccer team. He took Nora to father-daughter dances. He remembered school playdates and doctor's appointments and which teacher Nora didn't like and why. He was present in the specific way that matters. Not perfect, but genuinely, reliably there. He was a good husband in most of the ways that count. He was thoughtful. He remembered things. He was the person I called when something went wrong. When my father had his hip replacement, Daniel drove to Columbus with me without being asked and spent a week helping my parents while I managed the practical things. When I was passed over for a promotion I'd worked 2 years for, he took me to dinner and listened to me be angry about it for 3 hours without trying to fix it. We had disagreements. We had dry spells. We had the specific friction of 2 people who have been in the same orbit for a decade and sometimes forget to see each other clearly. But we worked at it. Or I thought we worked at it. That's the thing about a marriage with a secret at its center. You think you're working on the same structure, but one of you is working on a building with a rotted foundation, and the other is upstairs painting walls, completely unaware. I was upstairs painting walls for 11 years. It was a Wednesday in October. Nora had soccer practice at 4. Cal had a dentist appointment at 3:30 that I'd rescheduled twice and could not reschedule again. Daniel was at work. He worked in corporate finance, long hours, the kind of job that explained his phone always being face down on the counter. His iPad was on the kitchen island. We shared it loosely. It had both our accounts. We used it for recipes and the kids' homework and streaming. I was looking at it to find a pasta recipe I'd bookmarked. The notification came through while it was in my hand. The app was called Telegram. I knew what Telegram was. I'd used it for work occasionally, but Daniel had never mentioned using it. The notification preview. Last night was everything. I keep thinking about what you said, about how you've never stopped loving me. Come back to me. For real this time. The name on the notification was Lena. I stood there. The glass of water was in my other hand. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the notification to disappear from the screen. I set down the water. I picked up the iPad. I opened Telegram. The app required a passcode. I tried his birthday. Wrong. I tried our anniversary. Wrong. I tried the kids' birthdays. On Cal's birthday, our son's birthday, it opened. And there was Lena. I am not going to read you every message. I couldn't. Not because I don't remember them, because I remember them with a vividness that I expect will never fully fade, but because some of it belongs to the category of things you survive rather than things you share. What I will tell you is what I learned. Her name was Lena Vasquez. She was 34. From the messages I could piece together that she lived in the city. Chicago, same as us. She and Daniel had history. Long history. The messages referenced things that had happened years ago. A trip, a conversation, a version of their relationship that clearly predated our marriage. The most recent messages were from the past 4 months. They had seen each other 6 times that I could count. Work trips that Daniel had taken, 2 of which I had helped him pack for. 1 of which I had driven him to the airport for. Driven him to the airport. I sat at my kitchen island for 45 minutes reading. The water was still on the counter. The pasta recipe was still bookmarked. Outside the window, my neighbor was raking leaves in the thin October sun. Normal Wednesday afternoon. Completely normal Wednesday afternoon. I screenshotted everything. 47 screenshots. I airdropped them to my phone. I closed the app. I put the iPad back exactly where it had been. I picked up my keys and I drove to get Cal from school and took him to the dentist and sat in the waiting room reading a magazine about home renovation without absorbing a single word. I did not call Daniel. I did not text him. I did not in any way reveal that the floor had dropped out because I had decided somewhere in those 45 minutes at my kitchen island that before I said a single word to my husband, I was going to know everything. Not just what he'd handed me. Everything. I want to be clear. I am not a private investigator. I am a graphic designer from Columbus, Ohio, who had, up until that Wednesday, never had a reason to investigate anything more serious than which contractor overcharged us for the deck renovation. But I am observant. I am methodical. And I was, in those first days, operating on a kind of cold, focused energy that I now recognize as the psychological state of someone in shock who has converted the shock into function. I started with what I had, 47 screenshots from Telegram. I read them again, carefully. The way you read a document for work, looking for specifics, for dates, for names, for details that could be verified or cross-referenced. Lena Vasquez, Chicago. The messages mentioned a restaurant, Osteria Vento, a place I'd never been to on the north side. They mentioned her apartment building, not the address, but a landmark nearby. They mentioned a hotel, the Kimpton Gray, downtown, which I knew because it was 2 blocks from Daniel's office. I made a list. I made it in a notes app I password protected and labeled recipe ideas because I am, apparently, a person who does things like that under pressure. I pulled our credit card statements. 11 months back. I was looking for Osteria Vento and the Kimpton Gray. I found both. The Kimpton Gray appeared 4 times in 11 months. Always on nights Daniel had told me he was working late or at a client dinner. Osteria Vento appeared 6 times. I sat with that for a long time. Then I went back further. I pulled the statements from the year before, and the year before that. And that's when something shifted. Because the Kimpton Gray wasn't just in the last 11 months. It was there 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And I had to sit down for this one, 8 years ago. 4 months before our wedding. 8 years ago. 4 months before our wedding. I opened my laptop and I went through every email, every shared calendar entry, every text thread I still had from that period of our lives. The engagement period, the planning period, The time I was choosing flowers and writing vows and imagining my whole future. Daniel had told me he was in New York that weekend. A work trip. I remembered it specifically because I'd been annoyed. We had an appointment with the florist that Saturday that I'd had to reschedule. I pulled up the old credit card statement. The Kimpton Gray, Chicago. That Saturday. One night. He wasn't in New York. He was in Chicago, 20 minutes from our apartment, in a hotel room. I opened a new browser tab and I searched Lena Vasquez, Chicago. Her LinkedIn came up first. Corporate attorney, mid-sized firm, graduated law school 12 years ago. I stared at her photo for a long time. She was beautiful in a precise, put-together way. Dark hair, dark eyes. The kind of professional headshot that told you nothing about the person and everything about how they wanted to be perceived. I went back to the Telegram messages. I reread the ones that referenced their history. One in particular stopped me. I never should have let you go back to her. I said that then and I still mean it. Back to her. Back. To her. Not away from me. Not into something new. Back. To her. Which meant he had left. He had left Lena and come back to me. During our relationship, during our engagement, he had been with her and he had made a choice. And the choice he made was to marry me. Except he hadn't really chosen. He'd just kept both. Once I had that, I couldn't stop. I went back through everything I could find. Every business trip, every late night at the office, every weekend conference. I cross-referenced with the credit card statements. Not just the hotels, but the restaurants, the Ubers, the charges that had never made sense. What I found, over 3 days of quiet, methodical investigation while Daniel went to work and the kids went to school and the house ran on its normal schedule, was this. The affair with Lena Vasquez was not an affair. Not in the way that word usually implies. A weakness, a mistake, a chapter. It was a parallel relationship. Sustained, continuous, and deliberate. It had started, as best I could reconstruct, approximately 4 years before he proposed to me. They had been together, actually together, in the way that meant something, for almost 2 years before I came into the picture. He had met me. He had begun dating me. He had continued seeing Lena. He had proposed to me while he was still seeing Lena. He had married me while he was still seeing Lena. He had been seeing Lena in some continuous or recurring form for the entire length of our marriage. 11 years of my life. Every anniversary. Every pregnancy. Every holiday and crisis, and ordinary Tuesday and moment, I believed I was known and chosen and loved. I found out on a Wednesday. By Saturday, I had the full picture. I had a folder on my laptop with documentation, dates, amounts, cross-references that was 43 pages long. I had not said a word to Daniel. I had not cried yet either. That was coming. But not yet. Saturday night. The kids were asleep. Daniel was watching something in the living room. I could hear the TV from the kitchen where I was sitting at the table with my laptop closed and my hands folded on top of it and my heart doing something complicated in my chest. I had a decision to make. Not about the marriage. That decision, I realized, had already been made for me by 11 years of deliberate deception. I wasn't going to perform the deliberation about whether to stay. I already knew. What I had to decide was how. I had 3 options as I saw them. Option 1, walk into the living room and lay everything on the table right now. Tonight. Every screenshot, every credit card statement, every page of my 43-page document. Option 2, call a lawyer first. Get everything legally organized before I said a word. Protect myself and my children financially before the situation became chaos. Option 3, confront him, yes, but not just him. Because there was someone else in this story I hadn't yet addressed. Someone whose role I was still trying to understand. I chose option 2 first. I texted my college roommate Diane, who is now a family law attorney in Chicago, at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. I said, I need to talk to you Monday. Urgent. Not a social call. She wrote back in 4 minutes. I'm here. Monday 9 a.m. Bring everything. Then I chose option 3. Because there was something in those Telegram messages that I hadn't yet fully processed. Something that had been sitting in the back of my mind since Wednesday, patient and waiting, like a door I hadn't opened yet. In one of the messages, an older one from about 2 years ago, Lena had written, does she know about Kara? Does anyone? And Daniel had written back, no. And it stays that way. Kara. Who was Kara? I found her on a Sunday. It took me most of the day. I went back through everything, the messages, the statements, the timeline, looking for any other reference to the name Kara. I found 3 more mentions in the Telegram thread, all oblique. One said, Kara asked about you again. I didn't know what to say. One said, She's going to figure it out eventually, Daniel. She's not a child anymore. And the last one, the one that made my blood go cold, said, she deserves to know who her father is. Who her father is? I sat very still for a very long time. Then I went back to the credit card statements. I was looking for something different now. Not hotels, not restaurants. I was looking for a pattern. Regular payments to an individual or an account. Something that would look, on a statement, like nothing in particular. I found it. Every month for the past 9 years, a transfer of $800 to an account labeled L. Vasquez. $800 a month. For 9 years. Like clockwork. Always the 15th of the month. Always the same amount, never discussed, never visible on any shared financial document I'd had access to. Because it came from a separate account I hadn't known existed until I pulled the full credit report I'd ordered on Friday. Child support. Informal, private, kept completely off my radar. Daniel Calloway had a daughter. Her name was Kara. She was, based on the timeline I could reconstruct, approximately 9 years old. The same age as my daughter Nora. They had been born 4 months apart. I did not sleep Sunday night. I lay in bed next to my husband, next to this person I had shared a bed with for 11 years. And I looked at the ceiling and I felt something that I don't have a perfect word for. Not rage, though the rage was there. Not grief, though that was there too. Something older and colder and more fundamental. The feeling of a person who has been living in a house and just discovered the house was never real. That the walls were painted backdrop. That the address didn't exist. I thought about Nora. I thought about Cal. I thought about the specific things I would have to say to them, and how I would say them, and whether there was any version of this that didn't damage them. I thought about Kara, a 9-year-old girl who knew, apparently, that she had a father she wasn't supposed to talk about. I thought about Lena. And then I stopped thinking about Lena because that was a direction I couldn't go yet and stay functional. I thought about Monday morning. About Diane's office. About what I was going to do next. At some point before dawn, I made peace with something. Not with what had happened. I don't think you make peace with that. Not in one night. Maybe not ever. But with what I was going to do. I got clear. I got calm. The cold, focused energy came back. I had 43 pages of documentation. I had a lawyer. I had a plan. And I had one more thing to do before any of it. Monday morning. Daniel left for work at 8. I got the kids to school. I drove to Diane's office. 2 hours with Diane. She was good, methodical, direct, not theatrical about any of it. She looked at my documentation and said, "This is thorough." High praise from Diane. She explained the legal landscape. She told me what to file for, what to protect, what to expect. She told me that the secret account and the child support payments would be relevant to asset disclosure proceedings. She said, "You've done the hard part already. You know everything. Now it's about execution." I drove home. I called Daniel and told him to come home early. I said it was about the kids. Not a lie exactly, because it was absolutely about the kids, just not in the way he thought. He was home by 4. I had set the table with 2 cups of coffee, which in retrospect is a very strange thing to do when you're about to end a marriage. But my mother raised me to be a host, and apparently that runs deeper than I thought. He sat down. He looked at the coffee. He looked at me. "What's going on?" he said. I opened my laptop. I turned it to face him. On the screen was the first page of my 43-page document, the top of which read, in the font I use for client presentations, "What I know." I watched his face. I had been with this man for 13 years. I knew his face better than almost any face on earth. I watched it go through 5 distinct stages in about 4 seconds. Confusion, recognition, fear, the beginning of a story forming. And then, when he saw how thick the document was, something that collapsed into a kind of exhausted defeat. He said, "Reese?" "Don't," I said. He closed his mouth. "I'm going to talk," I said, "and you're going to listen. And then you can say whatever you want. But I go first." He nodded. I talked for 40 minutes. I laid out everything. The timeline. The hotels. The credit card statements. The telegram messages. The separate account. The $800 a month for 9 years. And then I said, "Tell me about Kara." The silence that followed was the longest silence I have ever sat in. He talked for a long time. I'm going to condense it, because some of it was the kind of desperate circling that people do when they've been caught in something they can't explain away. The starts and stops, the attempted justifications that collapse before they're finished. The moments where he looked at me with something that might have been genuine anguish, and might have been fear of consequence, and was probably both. What he told me, stripped of all the circling, was this. He and Lena had been together for 2 years before he met me. He had ended it, or tried to end it, when things with me became serious. He had proposed to me genuinely, he said. He had meant it. But 3 months after our engagement, Lena had called him. She was pregnant. She was keeping the baby. She wasn't asking for anything. Not a relationship, not marriage, not for him to upend his life. She was just telling him. He had panicked. He had not told me. He had told himself he would. He would, just not yet, just after the wedding, just after things settled. And the not yet had stretched into never, and never had stretched into 9 years. And Kara had been born and grown into a person, and he had been paying support quietly, and seeing her occasionally, and telling himself that this arrangement was sustainable, was private, was contained, was... And somewhere in those 9 years, the relationship with Lena had resumed. Not continuously. There had been gaps, he said, years where they weren't in contact beyond the logistics of Kara. But it had come back. Several times. The most recent version had been running for 11 months. Did you love her? I asked. He looked at his hands. I never stopped, he said. I'm sorry. I know. But you asked. I asked, I agreed. I love you too, he said. I know that probably sounds, it sounds like what it is, I said. It sounds like a man who wanted 2 lives and took them. He had nothing to say to that. Here is where I need you to stay with me. Because the story I just told you, the cheating, the secret child, the confrontation, the husband who loved 2 women and chose deception over honesty, that story is devastating enough on its own. And if that had been all of it, it would have been more than enough to process for a lifetime. But that wasn't all of it. 3 days after the confrontation, while Daniel was staying at a hotel downtown and I was beginning the quiet, terrible work of telling the people who needed to know, my phone rang. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I almost didn't answer. I was exhausted and raw and had been screening calls for 3 days. I answered. Is this Reese Calloway? A woman's voice. Careful and controlled. The voice of someone who has rehearsed this call. Yes, I said. My name is Lena Vasquez, she said. I think we need to talk. I met her at a coffee shop on the north side, 3 days after her call. Neutral ground. Public place. I told no one where I was going. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands around a coffee cup, looking exactly like her LinkedIn photo except more tired and more human. She stood when I walked in. She didn't offer her hand. Neither did I. We sat down. I want to say something before anything else, she said. I'm not here to make excuses for myself or for him. I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm here because there's something you don't know and you should know it. And I've been trying to decide whether to tell you for 3 years and I've decided that I can't not tell you anymore. I looked at her. Tell me. She reached into her bag and put a manila envelope on the table. Daniel didn't tell you about Kara, she said. I know that. But there's something else he didn't tell you. Something I didn't tell you either, which makes me complicit in it, and I have to live with that. She pushed the envelope across the table. Someone knew. Before your wedding. Someone knew about me and about Kara, and they knew Daniel hadn't told you. I looked at the envelope. Who? Lena's jaw tightened. Open it. Inside the envelope were printouts of emails. Emails between Lena Vasquez and my sister. My sister. Claire Mitchell. Claire Beaumont now. Married 6 years. Lives in Columbus. My older sister, one of my closest people. The woman who gave a toast at my wedding that made everyone in the room cry. The emails dated back to approximately 8 months before my wedding. Claire had reached out to Lena first. The opening email was brief and precise. I know who you are, and I know about the baby. I think Reese deserves to know the truth. Are you willing to talk to her? Lena had written back. They had exchanged emails over the course of 3 weeks. Lena had confirmed everything. The pregnancy, the relationship, the history with Daniel. She had been, from what I could read, genuinely conflicted. She hadn't wanted to be the one to blow up my engagement, but she hadn't denied the truth of it. And then Claire's emails had stopped. The last one, dated 6 weeks before my wedding, said, I've thought about this a lot. I've thought about what telling her would do to her, to the wedding, to the family, to everything she's built toward. I've talked to someone I trust, and I've made a decision I'm not proud of, but that I'm making anyway. I'm not going to tell her. I think she loves him, and I think she'll be happy, and I think some things are better left in the dark. I'm sorry. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but I can't be the person who destroys my sister's wedding. I read that email 4 times. I set the papers down. The coffee shop was playing something soft and jazzy. A couple at the next table was laughing about something. The barista called out a name. She knew, I said. She knew, Lena said. For how long? From that first email, about 8 months before your wedding. She found out and she chose not to tell you. I looked at the ceiling. I breathed. Why are you telling me now? I asked. Lena was quiet for a moment. Because Kara is 9 years old, she said. And she's starting to ask questions that I can't answer without telling her the full truth. And the full truth involves your family. And before that conversation happens, before my daughter has to navigate the reality of what her father is, I needed to not be carrying this secret anymore. She paused. And because you deserve to know. You always deserve to know. I'm sorry it took me this long. I drove to Columbus that weekend. I didn't call first. I couldn't. Every version of that phone call I tried to construct fell apart before it started. I needed to be in the room. Claire opened her door on a Saturday afternoon, and her face did exactly what Daniel's face had done. That rapid sequence, confusion to recognition to fear to something collapsing. Reese, can I come in? Her husband took the kids to the park. Claire and I sat in her living room, and I put the emails on the coffee table between us. She didn't deny them. I'll give her that. She looked at them, and she looked at me, and she said, I was going to tell you. You weren't, I said. The email says you weren't. I made the wrong choice, she said. Her voice was breaking. I know I did. I've known for 11 years that I made the wrong choice, and I've had to live with it every day. Have you? I said. Reese, I need to ask you something, I said. And I need you to answer it honestly, because at this point, dishonesty is not something I have any more tolerance for. I looked at my sister. When Nora was born, and then when we found out Kara existed, did you know? She closed her eyes. I didn't know about Kara, she said. Not at first. I found out about a year after Nora was born. Daniel told me. Daniel told her. Daniel had told my sister about his secret daughter, and my sister had kept that secret too. He told you to keep you quiet, I said, understanding it as I said it. He knew you already had a secret. He added to it. Claire was crying now, openly, the way she hadn't since our grandmother's funeral. He said it would destroy your family. He said Nora needed her father. He said a lot of things, I said. So did you. I'm sorry. She was barely audible. Reese, I am so sorry. I have been so sorry for so long. I looked at my sister, this person I had grown up alongside, who had held my hand at our father's surgeries and helped me move 4 apartments and stood beside me at my wedding knowing what she knew. And I felt something I hadn't felt yet in all of this. Not rage. Not grief. Something quieter and more permanent. Betrayal has a particular quality when it comes from someone you never thought to defend yourself against. There's no shield for it. It goes all the way in. I stood up. I need time, I said. I don't know how much. I know, she said. I'll wait. However long. I drove home to Chicago. I got on the highway and I drove and I let myself cry. Really cry. For the first time since Wednesday 2 weeks ago. The kind that comes from somewhere below the chest. That is about more than one thing. That is about all of it at once. When I stopped crying, I felt strangely lighter. Like something that had been pressurized for a very long time had finally been let out. I filed in November. Diane was thorough and I was prepared, and Daniel, to his credit, or perhaps just to his exhaustion, did not fight me on the essentials. He knew the documentation I had. He knew what contesting would cost him in more ways than money. We agreed on joint custody because our children loved their father and their father loved them, and that at least I believed was real. I would not take that from Nora and Cal, not as a punishment for what Daniel had done to me. The separate account was disclosed in full during proceedings. The asset division reflected it. Diane said I'd been well prepared. I said I'd had good teachers, and she gave me a look that meant, that's not what I meant, but she smiled. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I found that notification on the iPad. On the day it was finalized, I drove to the lake. I sat in my car in this parking lot by the water for about an hour. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't make a speech to myself. I just sat there and let it be over. Then I drove home to my children. This is the part that is the most complicated to explain and the most important. Kara Vasquez is 9 years old. She is Nora's half-sister. She is Cal's half-sister. My children have a sibling they didn't know existed for the first years of their lives. I thought about this for a long time, longer than almost any other part of this, because it would have been easy, understandable even, to decide that Kara was not my problem, that the complications of her existence were Daniel's and Lena's to manage. That my children's relationship with her was something that could be addressed later, slowly, maybe never. But I kept thinking about her. 9 years old, growing up with this complicated truth at the center of her life. Not her fault. Not something she chose. I called Lena. We had another coffee. I said, I don't know how to do this. I don't have a roadmap. But my kids deserve to know their sister, if she wants to know them. And she deserves to not be a secret anymore. Lena looked at me for a long time. You're a better person than I expected, she said. I'm a regular person, I said. I'm just trying to do right by the kids. We worked it out slowly. It is still being worked out. There is no perfect version of this. But Nora and Kara have met. They are cautious with each other and curious about each other in the way that children are when they sense they share something significant. Cal is Cal about it, philosophical and slightly suspicious, which means he'll probably be fine. This was not a situation any of us asked for, but there is a child in it who deserves to be treated like a full person. I am trying to make sure she is. My sister and I did not speak for 4 months after Columbus. She called. I didn't answer. She texted. I read them and didn't reply. She wrote me a letter, an actual letter, 3 pages, the most honest thing I think she'd ever put on paper, and I read it 6 times and put it in a drawer. At month 4, our mother called me. Not to take sides, my mother is not a sides taker, but to say, your father and I are worried about both of you. I don't know the whole story, and I'm not asking for it. I just want to know that my daughters are going to be okay. I said, I don't know yet. She said, that's fair. I love you. I called Claire the following week. We talked for 2 hours. It was not a reconciliation. Not fully, not yet. It was a beginning of one. She told me more about those 8 months before my wedding. The fear, the rationalization, the specific way she'd convinced herself she was protecting me. She told me that she had been in therapy for 3 years, working on what she'd done. She told me that not a week had passed without her thinking about it. I told her what the silence had cost me. Not just the 11 years I hadn't known. The particular added pain of learning it was someone in my family who'd had the information and made the choice to bury it. The way it had changed what I thought I knew about who I could trust. I told her, I don't know if this is fixable. She said, I know, but I don't want to not try, I said. Neither do I, she said. We are trying. It is slow and imperfect and requires honesty that is sometimes uncomfortable for both of us. But we are trying. It has been 14 months since a Wednesday afternoon in October. 14 months since a notification on an iPad. Here is who I am now. I am 38 years old. I am divorced. I am a mother of 2 children who are, somehow, in spite of everything, doing okay. Not perfectly, not without the specific sadness that comes from a family that changed shape. But okay. Genuinely okay. I am back at work full-time, which I hadn't been for the last 4 years of my marriage. I took on a lead role at my agency that I'd been offered twice and turned down. I am good at it. I had forgotten how much of myself lived in work, in the specific satisfaction of making something. I have an apartment, mine, just mine, in a neighborhood I chose entirely for myself. The furniture is what I wanted. The art on the walls is what I wanted. The kitchen makes me happy in a way that our house, which was decorated by committee, never quite did. My children are with me 4 days a week, and their father 3. Daniel is in therapy. He is, as far as I can tell, trying. I do not have space in my life right now to care about that more than neutrally, but I am not trying to destroy him either. He is Nora and Cal's father. I will keep showing up to the table in that regard for as long as it matters. I have thought a lot, in 14 months, about the question of what I missed. The signs I didn't see. The moments when something might have told me, if I'd been paying different attention, that the foundation wasn't solid. And I've come to this. I don't think I missed them because I was naive or stupid or willfully blind. I think I missed them because I trusted the person I'd given my trust to, and that person was not worthy of it, and that is his failure, not mine. I was not wrong to love him. I was not wrong to believe in the life we were building. Those were reasonable things to do with the information I had, the information I was never given. That's the thing no one tells you about being deceived. You don't fail to see what's hidden. You're simply not shown it. There's no intelligence test you fail. There's no warning sign you ignore. There's just a person who chose, every day, to maintain the lie, and you living your life in the reality they constructed. You didn't miss it. You were kept from it. I was kept from it. For 11 years. And then one Wednesday afternoon, the keeping failed. And I found out. And I survived it. If you made it here, thank you. I know this story is heavy. I know it covers a lot of ground. And I know that somewhere in these 14 months of my life, there are pieces of your life too. Whatever version of this you've lived or are living. Here's what I want to leave you with. You are allowed to be devastated and functional at the same time. Those two things can coexist. The world requires you to get the kids to school and make the coffee and drive to the lawyer's office, and you can do all of those things while being completely broken inside. You are not less broken because you're functioning. You are not less functional because you're broken. Trust your instincts. I had a notification on a screen and I followed it. I didn't talk myself out of what I was seeing. I didn't give benefit of the doubt where none was owed. When something tells you to look, look. Some betrayals come from where you least expect them. The hardest thing in this story for me, harder even than Daniel, was Claire. Because Daniel was supposed to be faithful to me in one specific way and failed. Claire was supposed to be my family in the oldest, most unconditional sense, and she chose comfort over truth. That is its own kind of wound. And if you have someone like that in your life, someone who knew and didn't tell you, I want you to know that your anger at them is legitimate. And so is your grief. And so eventually, if you get there, is the possibility of something repaired. And finally, there are children in complicated stories who didn't make them complicated. Kara didn't ask for any of this. Your version of Kara, whoever the innocent person is in your situation, didn't either. Be as generous as you can manage, not at the cost of yourself, but as much as you can. I'm still figuring all of this out. 14 months in, I am still mid-reconstruction, but I am standing. I am clear-eyed. I am more myself than I have been in years, possibly decades. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Drop your location in the comments. Like if this story hit home. Subscribe if you want to hear what comes next.